Now back to Gary. You mentioned that he was fairly hands-off with what you were working on, and then what he was working on, he basically just wanted you to spell check it and make sure that it wasn't wrong.
Yeah, when we did the first edition Dungeon Master's Guide, that was a huge project, and we had a round table that went through the manuscript page by page and really went through and heavily cross-checked and modified and changed and rewrote. In some cases, Gary said, I'll rewrite that and get it back to you. In other cases, it handed off small sections to individual editors to rewrite, to make, because we would come up with an objection that he could see hadn't been covered, but he wasn't interested in it. So, he said, okay, you guys do it. But that was the last thing where he allowed himself to be super edited, but that was the last of the three core books for AD&D, and it was really important that we got that one out and hopefully resolved any existing contradictions or places where there were potential for misunderstandings in the rules.
Now, that was a really good book. I got the first edition AD&D DMG after I had the second edition one, because I basically grew up on second ed and BECME and the various iterations of the basic D&D set. Sure. But there was so much good material in first edition, including the eclectic collection of very interesting curiosities in the first edition one, that it was very worthy, still relevant today. Question: did Gary ever invite you to any of his Hollywood parties?
No, I never went to anything in California. That was a separate entity, and there weren't very many of the Lake Geneva folks that got to go out there. And if you're at a designer, editor, artist level, you can't afford to go out on your own and just say, hey, we're coming to visit, So, but yeah, I don't know whether you've seen Pat Kilbane's new documentary about dreams in Gary's basement. He touches on that, and I think takes an honest but sensitive approach to that part of the TSR story, which I think a lot of us thought creatively that was probably the rift that led to a lot of other events that happened, because with that distance, Gary wasn't fighting with the balloons so often, but most of us designers and creatives that were left behind in Lake Geneva didn't think that anything out in California was a great use of resources, because for every project that saw print, every designer and editor had a half a dozen that didn't.
Well, can you share a happy memory, something you really enjoyed about your time with Gary?
Well, really, one of the most interesting things was playing in Castle Greyhawk, which I had to do at a convention, at a mini-con, and it took us a little while to figure out that we were in an Alice in Wonderland section. Once we figured that out, I saw people start dying because they didn't understand how really dangerous Wonderland was. And I made the genius move of basically finding an exit from the level and leaving everybody in there. I said, but I lived, so, and more than half of the people in there did not. So, well, my other fond memory of Gary, one of them was when he hired me. I was up for a Gen Con. There was a classified ad in Dragon for an editor position, and I went, I've been the editor on some newspapers in college and neighborhood, and so I filled it out. And I totally forgot about it because I was in the middle of finishing my master's degree in chemistry. And then went to that Gen Con, and as a preface, Gary knew of me because I had been annoying Dragon Magazine with letters and articles since the beginning. In Gen Con 9, I won Best Mage because the awards were by class, by character class in those days, that one. For my reward, I was forced to become a DM the next Gen Con, and they must have liked that because the following Gen Con, I went up Thursday morning on my way to something I was running, and Gary standing in line for food and waves me over and says, "When can you start?" And I went, "All right, that's great." I mean, that he knew me well enough, to call me over and just say, "When can you start?" So
kind of a backhanded hiring process. That's
well, and Mike Carr had gone through it and done the legwork on it and everything. And he was directly my supervisor, but
okay.
Gary had to approve it. And I guess Gary figured he saw me first and could have a moment. So it was a great moment. One of my other happiest moments at TSR was at one of the few TSR company picnics they had, and there was a pie eating contest. And I got a blueberry pie put out in front of me, and I'm looking at these people that think that they're talking about their competitive eating strategies and all of that. And I'm going, I'm just going to enjoy my blueberry pie. And I didn't try to win, but I did not get sick either. And I had a wonderful blueberry pie. I considered that I won. So that was great.